lot of different tasks in games. So it's not just you sitting down and reading a book or reading a complex presentation. You're actively engaging in the thing that you're learning about, right? And we all know climate change is a very complex thing, right? If you've tried to teach people about climate change, even you know what sometimes it gets too complex and complicated. So one of the ways in which we raise climate awareness is to use games to impart that, right? So you turn something into a game-like experience. That's what gamification means in learning. Next slide. And so UNICEF, BCCN, with the support of UNICEF, have endeavored to create a game, right, with the goal of helping young people, children, learn about climate change in a simple, engaging format, in a gamified way. And so we are developing this game. It's called Phetogo Climate Challenge. Awesome. It's called Phetogo Climate Challenge. And so we want to make learning about climate change more fun, more engaging, more experiential. We want to be able to communicate things that are complex about climate change and climate action in a fun and engaging way, so that in the classroom, kids don't have to learn about climate change just from the book or just from the teacher dictating, but they can teach themselves about climate change, right, by playing a game. Because we all live and experience climate change, we see it, right? And so a little bit about the Phetogo Climate Challenge. Phetogo ka Setswana, it means change, right? Oh, thought I said climate. Phetogo means change, right? And so this change isn't just about raising awareness on the change that's happening around the climate and the environment, but this change is saying we need to change, right? So this climate challenge is doing two things. It's teaching people about the change that we're experiencing in Botswana because of climate change across the different districts. That's one. But it's saying we need to change. There's some actions that different people, different stakeholders with different access to resources and strengths need to do. So Phetogo means change, yes, of the climate, but more importantly, of our behavior and the way we do things. And the intention of this game is to impart this idea amongst children and young people as they play, that there's a change that we can do to address what? Climate change. In the spirit of mindset change, right? All right, so yeah, it's designed to highlight the specific, climate challenges specifically seen across the country, across the different districts, from drought to flooding to desertification that are specific to Botswana. And it engages players to take meaningful actions as they play a game. They are challenged by a particular climate scenario, right? And then players are challenged to take an action to address that climate scenario. Right? And players would have different characters. These different characters have different resources that they have access to, right? Some are government, some are farmers, but they are all characters or players in this game, right? And they have to address a particular climate scenario. But it's also collaborative, which means players, when they play this game, need to work together to agree on the best course of action to address a particular climate scenario, right? And then they get points from an action that they take, and that contributes to an impact tracker, right? And you win the game when you've reached a certain level of impact, collaboratively as different stakeholders, all right? So we're gonna do a couple of activities. I've just given you a concept, this game, right? What this game intends to do and the different modalities within the game. But this game hasn't been developed yet. Why? Because this game has to be co-developed, right, with young people. And your perspectives in this is very important. I told you that the climate scenarios that we want to reflect on this game need to be climate scenarios that we experience across the different districts. That is why the 17 district climate champions, your input is very important, because we want to know what are the climate scenarios where you come from in your district, right? And so we're going to start with challenge number one. But before with challenge number one, right, just the purpose of this session is to get your input on what knowledge is imparted in this game, right? So you are game developers with us. You go back to LinkedIn after this and write game developer because you're actively contributing in the development of this game, right? And thank you so much for joining us to contribute. All right, are we ready? So activity one has to do with brainstorming the climate challenges, right? So that's to say, what challenges are we going to reflect within this game, okay? And so we're gonna take time to choose one climate challenge. Is that what's reflected on the paper, one? Yeah, one climate challenge. So you're gonna choose one climate challenge. And don't be general, right? Discuss it and really think about the climate challenges that we don't necessarily always talk about. Sure, there's flooding, there's drought, but what other climate challenges are there, right? So think about one climate challenge and discuss it. I think I'm gonna give you just 2 minutes, right? And so this is the climate challenge that you will be focusing on for the rest of this activity, for the rest of the other activities, right? So the first question there is to discuss what that climate challenge is that is peculiar to the different parts of Botswana, the different districts, and then start thinking about how it's impacting the different communities, right? All right? So I'm giving you 5 minutes to do this. 5 minutes starts now. Make sure they write on the paper an experience that you feel like, you know, this what happened in my village, this happened in my town, right? So if there's a particular experience that was very specific to where you come from, share it and have it written down. No, dipampiri le di tlogela mo go bone. So ra go ba ha dipampiri tsa the next activity, activity 2, right? So we've come up with some challenges that we can reflect in this game, ne? We're moving to activity 2. All right, good job on coming up with the challenges. The next thing is to think about the solutions, right? So so that we have the game in mind when we're doing this, think about Phetogo as a board game, ne? And on this board, instead of that Monopoly map, you have the map of Botswana, right? And then on that map of Botswana, there's different parts of the country where we have indicated different climate challenges. And in this game, you are moving around the country, encountering some of the challenges that you've indicated, right? So you've identified the challenges. Now we're thinking about the solution. So imagine a player, ne? Has arrived at a certain part of the board of the map of Botswana. When you get there, you are presented with a challenge, right? And so there's 2 stacks of cards on the table. The first card is the one that we're going to talk about. It's called an action card, ne? This action card is where the solution comes in, right? So you're going to be told to choose a card that has a solution to the climate challenge that you have just encountered. So let's think about solutions. Think about 2 solutions that can be used to address that climate challenge, right? 2 solutions that can be used to address that climate challenge. So imagine you've encountered, on the board game, you've encountered the climate challenge and you're told to choose between 2 cards, right? You read both cards, and as a team, you're supposed to select which solution is best. So now think about 2 solutions that could address the challenge that you've identified. We're doing 10 minutes. As you're thinking about these solutions, think about what resources might be necessary to address this solution. Resources. What resources might be necessary to address, to apply this solution? Could be money. It could be some specific technologies. It could be some sort of manpower or skill. What resources would be necessary to address that challenge or to apply the solution that you have identified? So do that for both. And after addressing the resources, let's think about outcomes, right? So this is still activity 2. So now that you have your challenges and your solutions, as well as the resources that they need, we're going to come up with characters, ne? Characters. No, there's a lot. We're not done. We're going to come up with characters. These characters are stakeholders who are necessary for the implementation of the solutions you've identified. These characters are stakeholders who are responsible for implementing that solution. So think about the stakeholders that are necessary for implementing that solution, right? Who's supposed to implement this solution? So that's activity 3. Who's supposed to, yeah. And then when you do that, also think about what abilities this stakeholder has, special abilities that they have. Write them down if any comes to mind. Resources that they have access to. What resources do they have access to? What are their strengths in implementing this solution? What are their strengths in implementing this solution? Have you started the time? Oh. Around 7 minutes. It's originally 3. These will be the characters. So that character will have a character token. You know how in Monopoly there's a hat and there's different characters. So these stakeholders will become a character in this game. I'm trying to think about a game that has characters with different powers. So the characters you're coming up with, the stakeholders you're identifying, will be characters in this game that people get to be. So when you think about this character, do they have any special abilities? By abilities, I'm not talking about superpowers, right? Not superhuman strength or X-ray eyes. Think about what their strengths are. What's special about them that gives them a special advantage in addressing this or implementing this solution? Again, let's be contextual, ne? We want this is a Botswana game. It's a Botswana game. When you play it, o motho e tshamekang, tshwantse gore a kgone go reflect a tlhaloganye sentle gore a go the government go tewa mang ke mang government a kere ga go the community leader go tewa mang mo Botswana re na le bokgosi re na le bo molaodi re ra mang specifically. Let's be contextual. Are they any part of this solution? So think about those specific real-life stakeholders that actually play a part in implementing solutions at different levels. I can read a phetogo. E biditswe ka leina la Setswana because ke game ya Setswana. Ya Botswana le bana ba Botswana. So I don't want you to say government, ne? Whose government? Who? Is there a specific part of the government who's implementing? I carry, but for implement and solution of government. Has government ki project it away ministry of something or department of something. So there needs to be a certain implementer within government. So on a policy level?
Yes. Police level and decision level of cabinet is parliament is got from there you cannot specifically choose one as long as
What solution?
For which solution we have a couple of them. Our problem is detailing. So how do we the solution the government financing so that you don't have so much finance. We have the regulatory so that panels don't have to become expensive. What about entrepreneurs? You think they play a key role?
Hydroponics, aquaponics, this is private sector, right? So also think about why. Do they have access to any special resources or knowledge or something? उसका वार 1 minute left, 10 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, very quickly, the last activity, it's gonna take 5 minutes. MCRA, HAIL. This last activity has to do with the impact and outcomes of the actions that you've identified. And remember, there's related from the challenge to the solution to the stakeholders. These are the stakeholders that are implementing the solution, right? So now you're going to identify, you're going to discuss the impact of the actions that you've created, ne? So think about how each solution will affect maybe the environment, will affect communities, will affect the economy, right? So we're looking for outcomes. This action happens, there's this outcome. I get when you play Monopoly, when you jump on a specific box, the outcome of it is getting jail or whatever. Or you get extra houses. I don't know, it's been long since I played Monopoly. So think about the impact of the solutions, of the actions, right, that you've planned out. And let's be a bit complex about them. We want the positive impacts, negative impacts. Because sometimes a solution, you implement it and it has a positive effect, ne? And then has a negative effect as well. I have an example there on the slide. You might decide on building a dam, right? That's a good thing. If the problem was water scarcity, you built a dam, there's positive impacts, right? It might prevent flooding, water availability, blah, blah, blah. But it could also affect wildlife, right? It could affect ecosystems. It could mean people are displaced because now you are building dams. So for each action, there's a positive impact, there's a negative impact. This is important for the game. Why? Because when players play the game, they need to understand in addressing climate change, it's not always straightforward. There are positive impacts, there are negative impacts. You need to weigh. You need to weigh. So this is the part where we're trying to communicate the complexity of addressing climate change. It will happen in the game while we're also doing the positive and negative. An action maybe would give you 2 points for a positive impact. But then they'd maybe get disqualified by 1 point for a negative impact. So if you remember the impact tracker I told you about, that's how these actions are affecting whether you reach the impact level you're supposed to reach to win the game. So that's why it's always about weighing. So we're done. What we're going to do now is you're going to select one presenter. You're going to have 2 minutes to present the challenge that you guys have agreed on, the solutions, the actions that you guys have recommended for this challenge, the stakeholders responsible for implementing it and why, in terms of the resources they have access to, their strengths, and then the impacts of the actions that they can take. So I'm gonna need one from each group. So when you describe your results from the activity, describe them as actions in the game, as characters in the game, as, you know, in a gamified way. Okay, so thank you very much for contributing to this game design. What's gonna happen next is we're gonna use the challenges that you guys identified, as well as their associated solutions or actions, and the characters that you guys developed for this game, as well as the outcomes for the game, right? And they will be used to come up with the Phetogo Climate Challenge, and with the different challenges that players encounter as they're playing the game, right? And once this is done, you would have been a contributor to this incredible tool that's going to educate young people and young children across different schools in Botswana on climate change. So thank you very much for participating. Group leads, Obaking. Who? Patricia? Laura? I'm going to need you guys to submit the complete papers to the back behind the Lotto thingy after this session. But thank you very much for participating, and stay tuned for announcements on how the Phetogo Climate Challenge game develops. Look out on our social media, BCCN. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Sepiso.